Welcome, everyone, to Creating the Future's Integrity Team, Integrity Body. It's good to see everybody. It has been quite a while. I'm Hilda Gottlieb with Creating the Future, and um, we've got several people who are going to watch today and comment via YouTube. So Dimitri will be keeping an eye on the YouTube stream, and it's just really, really good to see everybody. We'll start the way we always start, it's just sort of bringing ourselves into the room. If you will tell us who you are, where you are, whose ancestral lands you are sitting on, and something that's been meaningful in your life um, this past, I don't know. And Justin, I want to start with you because I want to know how you are. And you've been on all of our minds so much.
Well, thank you. So, Justin Pollock, I am in Washington, D.C., which is formerly the land shepherded and lived on by the Notachtank and Piscataway. And actually, it was a combination of, it was actually a convergence point for a lot of Native peoples. Um, I rallied on Saturday, so all those clips that you see, I was a member of that. Had my little sign that said, DC needs de-icing, um, and and it was good to be a part of such a you know relatively large effort. Um, Other than that, it's, much like I think LA, it's a little crazy to have unidentified people taking people off the streets. We had friends who basically told their daughters as we were going to school and starting up school, like if someone comes up and they fail to tell you who they are and give you a name, just start screaming you're being kidnapped. And that's not really how you want to start, you know, high school every year. I thought that the lockdown drills were bad. It's worse than that. So um, that said, it is not just my reality. It's a reality I think that many people are experiencing and have experienced, even in many ways prior to this. So um, all we can do is hope. I will say this actually as a plea. So for this is more for those in the states as constituents. We in Washington D.C. have no representation, and I was actually lobbying last week, pleading representatives to represent us in terms of what was going on. But one of the critical things is that right now they are trying to insert 14 different bills that eliminate a lot of the self-rule that we have in terms of being able to elect our mayor, our attorney general, our own budgets, all the stuff that's referred to here as self-rule. If you have a senator in particular that is a Democrat, please tell them to filibuster any single legislation that has those riders or amendments on it. Any compromise to say, well, we're getting something better, basically means that you, the senator, are actively removing my rights as a citizen. That's it. So that's my PSA. Um, that's there. On the happy side, my eldest started at Michigan State 2.5 weeks ago. That's been very exciting, and my younger is playing volleyball. So we go and we enjoy just people living lives and doing joyous things.
Please continue to let us know what we can do. Use the board listserv, use anything you can to please let us know what we can do. Thank you. And if you are watching on YouTube, please comment and dive in terms of telling us who you are, where you are, and a little bit about what's going on in your world. Who wants to go next?
Can I
Yeah,
go next? Because I want to, yeah, Justin, I'm sorry that you're dealing with that. And I'm going to tell you my first of all, well, I'll introduce myself and then segue. Angie Eikenberry, I'm in Hartford, Connecticut at the University of Connecticut School of Public Policy. That's my day and night job. And I'm on the lands of the Eastern Pequot, the Golden Hill Paugussett, the Lenape, the Mashantucket Pequot, Mohegan, Nipmuc, and the Schaghticoke. So my awesome that I want to share with Justin is my daughter is, at Georgetown, as you know, and does a rowing thing, but this semester she's also interning at Senator Blumenthal's office. And so I'll make sure, bring this up to her and find out what Senator Blumenthal's position is related to this. But it's been pretty awesome to I get kind of daily calls from her about, policy issues that they're focusing on. And I think, thank goodness for our our Connecticut members of Congress are trying to fight the good fight. I think, pretty and doing as much as they can. And I really appreciate that. And hopefully they're staying strong when it comes to DC rights as well. But I'll definitely communicate that with them. In fact, there's been so many times where I've like, well, there's not much I have to say to my members of Congress because they're already in alignment with what. So maybe this is a time where I can have some influence. So it's good to see everyone. It's nice here in Hartford today.
yay. Yay. Who wants to dive in next? Go ahead, Carl.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carl. I'm Carl Wilding. I think I've traditionally described myself as creating the future's European or UK outpost because I'm based here about 20 miles outside of London in the UK. It's the end of summer, isn't it, everyone? The nights are starting to draw in and so on. I can start to feel the weather sort of changing. So clearly always a time for reflection. Justin, I'm so sorry. And in fact, everyone over your side, I am just so sorry about what's happening. I mean, I mean, in some respects, it's so hard to sort of explain that, what we always sort of thought as the sort of the foremost democracy in the world by, pretty much every measure that I can see, it's becoming an autocracy. And he's mimicking all those sort of people that traditionally we have sort of held up as being the worst of everything that there is. So I'm going to be sort of optimistic and, I know you guys, it's not that far till the midterms, is it now? Unless he gerrymanders his way around that. Spring always follows winter. Yeah. And my awesome for you all, partly because Vu asked, what did you want from Costco? Is that I've just got a dog.
Oh.
Which is completely tipped our life upside down, I think it is fair to sort of say. If I said to you all, he's a lurcher, I don't know if you would know what that is. So if you know what a greyhound is, so basically lurchers are sort of crossbreeds and their one purpose in life is chasing rabbits or squirrels or sort of something like that. So basically they've got what's called a very high prey instinct. So in other words, you can't let him off the leash at all. He's a rescue. So he's had some bad things happen to him in his previous life. But my awesome is that we are all going to do our best to right whatever's been wronged to him and give him a good life. And whilst that's a bit tough sometimes, it's incredibly fulfilling. And if nothing else, it takes my mind off all the shit that's going on everywhere else.
That's what dogs are for. It's entirely what dogs are for. Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad. Send us pictures. Yeah. Share pictures we want to see. We love babies of all kinds, human and otherwise. John, how are you doing?
Good morning, everyone. John Epps. I'm doing well. I'm very excited. This is birthday week for me, so I'm excited about still being here. I think one of the benefits of being around for a long time is I don't feel like this is the first time I've seen this movie. I wish it was the last time. But what comes to my mind, and I think I posted this on a repost of one of your articles, is that we will overcome. And so I remain comfortable and confident that this is a challenge, but it's probably not the last challenge, and it's not the final challenge. So I'm busy working with groups, particularly groups of men of color, to look at how we respond and move forward in a world that is a bit hostile toward us. And that at the same time, we look at new ways and better ways, and we don't give tit for tat, but we want to bring something better. And so I stay focused on that. And that gets me up every day and puts a smile on my face and keeps me at peace. So thank you very much.
Glad you're here. Really glad you're here. And I always appreciate your perspective. Jessica, welcome. We haven't seen you in a while. It's really good to see you.
Hi, yeah. It's good to see you all too. Yeah, so I'm Jess. I am in Western New York. I always have to look this up because I'm familiar with Haudenosaunee, but like the actual land was originally Wenro-Ronan land, but it prompted me to like look up that nation, and they kind of ended up under like the Five Nations because I'm in Western New York, near the border of Canada. So there's a lot of different groups there, right? So okay, in terms of, yeah, so I'm a social worker and I do direct service, but also community organizing work. I've been at the intersection of disability work and immigration and refugee work for a couple of years now. So yeah, we're feeling a lot of this in different ways. So it's been, there's kind of to what John was saying, like I always have to remind myself, and I try to remind others too, that we come from, our country was based off of slavery. Reason why I'm sure we talk about like our native lands is to remind ourselves that we are on unceded, most of us are on unceded land, and there's where that stemmed from as well. I'm also Puerto Rican, so like even though I didn't grow up there, we are still a colony. So always kind of keeping that in mind of like the balance of what our country has been and what it is now, and just like the movement work and all the different changes over time. So I would say like the meaningful work I'm doing is like really just because of like the organizing and a lot of the different work I do, I have been, and the city I live in is it's a small, we call it like, it's a small city. Like we're a relatively big city, but the joke is like we're always 3 degrees of separation from each other. Like we're not very far. So kind of one of the pros to that is that we're always easily connected with somebody. And while we still have our issues with silos and stuff, there's a lot of us who are connecting or staying connected or using the grassroots work that we're doing to figure out how do we work together and how do we support each other and invest in that. So I've been uplifted by the amount of people who I hadn't seen prior to the election and getting involved, like people who are involved now that weren't involved before. So that's been meaningful and helpful. Yeah.
Good. Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. And the work you're doing is so needed right now. Oh my gosh. So needed. Vu, are you able to chime in, or are we like in line getting lots of bottled water?
Hey everyone. Uh I'm okay. I'm in the least visited aisle of Costco right now, which is the car electronics department here. I'm doing okay. Congratulations on your new dog, Carl. I'll get some dog food for when I visit you next time. Um yeah, I'm just hanging on right now. My new book is coming out, and that's been causing a lot of challenges, but also it's been really exciting, except for the AI ripoff book that just came out
Mm.
along with it. But my awesome is that my little 12-year-old, his voice changed. He's now like, yeah, it's making me kind of sad, but he's also still very, very cuddly.
Oh.
Like during the day, he's still like, I don't know you. Please drop me off 2 blocks away from my school. But then when at night, he's like, Daddy, can we snuggle?
Oh.
And I'm just trying to hold on to this for as long as I can. So it's been really awesome.
Ah, it's the best stuff. It's the best stuff. Yay.
Yeah, I have just a comment for Vu. So Vu, I taught 6th grade, which is right around that age, and they crave adults so much, but they don't want it to be their parent. So figuring out how to thread that needle, like being like the adult that's not parenting, in those moments when they like do turn to you. But I will tell you from the other side, from being a teacher in the classroom, like they really want adult interaction. So
Oh,
just wanted to share
well,
that.
that's good. They do have their uncles and aunts and stuff, and so maybe I'll get them more engaged that way. Thank you, Justin. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Dimitri, you're up next. Let me mute mine.
Hello, everyone. Dimitri.
Wait 1 sec. Okay, go.
Hello, gang. Nice to see you all. It's been so long. I love all these faces on the screen of playing a game where I don't have center square at the moment, but who knows? I may on one of your screens. I'm talking to you from Tucson, Arizona, the home of the Tohono O'odham, the unceded lands of the Tohono O'odham and the Pascua Yaqui peoples. It has been a crazy time in so many ways. I guess if I was to talk about awesomes, I have 2 awesomes. One awesome is that even though it's a small victory, that you can make a difference. Tucson had a giant data center that was supposed to go in. There was a lot of NDAs around it, and it finally learned through some good reporting from one of our local papers, a local online nonprofit paper, that it was Amazon who was putting in this data center. And the community just rallied against it. I mean, there was thousands of people that went to informational propaganda meetings and et cetera, et cetera. This has been in the works for 2 years. And finally, the city council came down and voted 0-4 all against, and blocked the data center. And the main issues was water and electricity, and just like electricity is everywhere when these data centers are going in, but also water. There is no more water here, and we're in the midst of one of the biggest droughts that this region had, and I'm talking about the whole Western United States, has been in. And the amount of water that would be used for something that has not mattered in the past. All of a sudden, we need to use all this energy and we need to use all this water, and we need to pay for it ourselves, meaning the community is going to pay for additional electrical capacity, and what are we going to do in the future in the water? So awesome that we were able to stop that as a community, and I think it serves as an example. I know many other communities are looking as to what happened. in spite of the fact what the orange one is saying, that they're going to pull out all the stops to put in data centers. So hopefully we can continue as individuals and communities to stop that. And that was awesome. My second awesome is grandchild. We have our weekly calls with video calls where we get to see primarily the 4-year-old who dominates everything. But this last time, the youngest is getting old enough to just really get what's going on. So he kind of stands in the background and waves at us on the screen. And it's just so adorable and awesome to know that he knows that we're there and that we're paying attention to him, even though he doesn't get center stage on the screen. So again, I'm happy to see everyone and glad that we're all together finally after such a long time.
Absolutely. Get my sound back on here. There we go. Yeah, it is the thought that we can at least still have power locally, that we still can make change locally, has been very buoying. And I'm not sure the community's reaction would have been what it was if we weren't so all of us so frustrated that we have no agency at the federal level, that it was like, oh, good, something we can actually effect. But I've never been so proud of our elected officials here in Tucson for unanimously standing up and really eloquently, beautifully saying no. So it's pretty amazing. I too am on the unceded lands of the Tohono people and the Pascua Yaqui people. We are experiencing on these lands right now extreme drought. We had a very, very dry summer in the middle of an extreme drought anyway, and really just makes you reflect on the people who lived with these cycles over time and didn't have air conditioning and didn't have turn on the tap and the water is there. And there's something very, very precious about living in the desert. It really just makes you very, very aware of our environment and how delicate it is, how precious it is. Couple of awesomes, a couple of meaningful things. One is that I have been writing the book. I have been writing the book on catalytic thinking. I passed the halfway point. It's going really well. I'm really excited about it. I have everything crossed that I may have a rough draft done or a first draft done by the end of September. I may, if I can just keep everything crossed and keep focusing and nothing else pops up out of nowhere, I may be able to get it out to a peer review team by October 31st. So John and Angie, I know that you both are on that list. And anybody else who would like to take a look at the book ahead of time, just in the very, very first draft, and say, okay, I think you need this, it needs that, it makes sense here, it doesn't make sense there. I've never understood how anybody can do something major without getting input like that, and I really, really appreciate it. So that's number one. Number two, which is really exciting, is starting pretty much November 1st, Dimitri and I will be in New Zealand through the end of the year. We had an opportunity. It's just the way the world works. My daughter turns 40 in December and her best friend turns 40 in December. And they both decided that they want to celebrate in New Zealand and they want their parents to come with them, which is very awesome. And Lizzie looked at me and said, but I also know you've worked in nonprofit your whole life and you don't suddenly have the budget to spend time in New Zealand that on a trip that came out of nowhere that we're not saving for blah, blah, blah. And so I went to all of our friends and colleagues and our fellows in New Zealand and said, the only way we can do this is if we've got work in New Zealand. And so they have come together And I'm like, it makes me want to cry. They have come together and pulled together about 3 to 4 weeks of work for me, for Dimitri and I, doing workshops. May Miller Dawkins has actually pulled together a workshop that she's got folks coming over from Australia to New Zealand for this workshop. So we'll be doing 3 to 4 weeks of work in New Zealand, and that will cover all of our expenses so that when Lizzie and Jessica arrive in December, we can play a little bit. So we're excited. It is amazing. I mean, I'm so excited about the work. I'm so excited about seeing friends and colleagues we haven't seen in a long time. Some of whom I have actually never met in person, which is always very cool. It also means that year end for us is in essence October 31st. So all of the year-end appeal stuff, all of the closing out of books and all of that stuff, getting everything ready so that by October 31st, we can just pack our clothes, pack our stuff and head out. So that's pretty exciting. The one other thing I will share with y'all, if I get distracted, I want to just share this during our time together here. Living in the desert and things coming out of nowhere. Friday morning, I woke up and it appears that I was bit by a brown recluse spider. And so, yeah, so far everything is fine. They've got me on antibiotics. They're not worried. It doesn't seem to be growing and expanding up my foot. It's on my toe. And so I can't really walk. But it is also distracting me. So if at some point you watch me do this or something, I just want to give you warning that when stuff happens, and when it rains, it pours, and all of that good stuff. So yeah, I figure I've been in the desert for 45 years, and this is the first time it has bit me. So hopefully I got another 45 years before it bites me again. But yeah, that's all there is.
That's crazy. There was something I wanted to share though, after thinking about like some updates and stuff, if you don't mind.
Oh, go.
I actually used catalytic thinking questions for one of our task force meetings. It was in April. So around the time where, refugee resettlement had already stopped, a lot of funding stuff was coming up, like basically lack of funding. ICE, and deportation and enforcement was ramping up. And it's a group of folks that are at the intersection, like are either community-based organizations, school-based organizations, county, city, some state, and whether they're at immigrant refugee work or disability work or something, and like where that works all together. And the questions afterwards, I got a lot of feedback from people saying that was really helpful for them because they came in very distressed and lacking a lot of hope, and that conversation, I had breakout groups with everybody, helped them feel like they had something to work towards, and that there was something that they could do together, and that there was support and investment, and we have each other at least. So
thank you for sharing that. Yeah, these are important times for that. Really, 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 really important times for that, which is why we're diving into what we're diving into today, which is just constantly thinking about what's possible. Jess, you're reminding me that whole, if all we do is react and resist without also creating what's possible, we're just going to keep playing defense forever and ever and ever and ever. And that need to focus. Yeah, we have to resist. We have to. It's not an either or. It's a context. If the context of why we're resisting is because of what's possible, it's very, very different than we're just resisting and reacting. So thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you so much. One of the things that has changed, and it's the topic that I've sent out all the information to y'all on. One of the things that has changed dramatically in the past 9 months is it's not so much the project that we've been trying to raise money for, which is documenting all of the case studies that we've done, all of the demonstration projects that we've done, documenting those and sharing what we've learned. The whole landscape of where we exist has changed. You know, what we're all talking about here. What may have made sense from a perspective of what is the story we're telling a year ago makes no sense now. Makes no sense now. And the work we have to do has not changed. We still need to document everything that we've learned. We still need to share it. What has changed dramatically is the framing. And I have felt like I am in a constant sort of reaching back almost. There's a wonderful Marshall McLuhan a quote that talks about we address the future through the rear view mirror. We're constantly looking at, instead of looking at what we can create, we're constantly looking back at where we've been. And I feel like I have to keep playing catch up of what's the next way to frame this? What's the next way to frame this? Where we had been talking about it as reframing how capacity building is done. We're now having to think about who's thinking about funding how capacity building is done. That sounds real esoteric when the world is on fire. And so, you know, it's really, really been a lot about that. But one of the other things that has happened is that a year ago, AI wasn't what it is now. It wasn't in everybody's, you know, I mean, it's in everything. I can't load a PDF without it asking me if I want AI to read it to me. It's like, no, I can read it. Thank you. I'm good. But it's everywhere. That doesn't change. Again, it doesn't change what this is at the core, but it changes some of what might be possible. At the core, what this project is, we've got lots of recorded conversations, and we've got lots of people who have been in these projects where those conversations aren't necessarily recorded, but there's things we want to know. There's, you know, we're going to need interviewers to talk to people, to listen to those recordings, and document what we've learned from that. Obviously, the first thing we're going to need to do is determine the questions that we want answered. When we are looking at documenting what we've learned, we want to make sure that those questions are consistent throughout all 30 plus of those demonstration projects. What do we want to know? What are those learnings? Several things have occurred as I've been talking to people, and I've had a wonderful year of talking to potential funders, talking to just about anybody. All I am doing is having conversations. I found that if I went out and said I'm doing fundraising, it would make me crazy. I don't enjoy the thought of going out and just, you know, doing the power dynamic thing. But if I'm just having lots of conversations with lots of people about what we're doing, things bubble up. Somebody is going to say at some point, you know who you need to talk to. That's the person. And so I've been having really, really wonderful conversations, and many of them with funders. And some of what's occurring to me, we had initially budgeted probably about $250,000, $300,000 for this project. We were going to need interviewers. We were going to need writers. The interviewers needed to know what they were doing. They needed to have and come together as a team and create questions that they were going to address. Several things are occurring. One is that the more we can build collective enoughness into this budget, into this project, I shouldn't say budget, the more that we can share the work with folks who want to do it. There's so many people who, and this is what has occurred to me, so many people in the conversations I've had who've said, if you want help with interviews, I would love to be part of that. And suddenly it occurred to me that we don't necessarily need to, Angie and Carl and you and I have talked, both of us, about university students, PhD students, who are steeped in research methodologies. Do we necessarily need that? If we can pull together what the questions are and people are really eager to interview, that also helps them learn and practice catalytic thinking. So that was a thought of, as board members, we can all, as community members, we can all say, there's 30 projects. Okay, there may be, 45 people to talk to. Let's split it up. And John talks to 2 people and Carl talks to 2 people, and just that engagement, that there's something powerful in thinking about it, not as experts again, but just as us as community members. So that's been exciting to think about. And another piece of it, and this is just process, as people have been asking me, what is the process going to be? The thinking out loud of it. We will probably want to, at the beginning of next year, do another major community engagement effort like we did when we were initially trying to figure out our plan. To ask our community, what questions do you want answered out of these? If we're going to come up with case studies, what are the questions that would help you? What are the questions that, so again, it not being the job of experts to come up with what the questions are, or in AI language, the prompts, but to actually have our community be the ones to determine. If they're the ones who are going to benefit, they're the ones who need to determine, what do we want to know? And so looking at it again through that lens, that real community-based collective enoughness lens, has been really exciting. And then the thought about artificial intelligence. AI can absolutely listen to all those recordings, or we can actually get them transcribed through AI, look at those recordings, and once they have the questions, find the stuff, find the relevant pieces in all of those recordings. I mean, think about just our conversations about what's next for our mission and the 10-year mission. We spent a year talking about that. All of those conversations are recorded. To be able to not have to listen to all of those conversations, but have AI do transcripts and then have AI pull some of the questions, some of the answers out to the questions that we've come up with. There just seems like there's stuff there that artificial intelligence might be able to be helpful with. And so one, I wanted to just share with you all the changes in thinking around obviously how we're framing this, and that's a moving target. That is just, now it's nonprofits are under attack. A year ago, it was, don't you think you could be better for your community? It's like, no. Now we're under fire. But also just, thoughts about having volunteers do the interviewing, having, we'll get into AI as a real discussion in a couple minutes, but just, is what I'm saying raising anything for y'all?
So I actually know somebody who's an oral historian, because I've started a project and I was connected with him, who's been developing a platform that uses AI to help transcribe audio, and then it will, there's still humans still have to go in and edit it and stuff, but it will eventually help with like indexing and creating chapters, units, and indexing basically like a conversation, so you can pull threads together. So he kind of describes it as like if you think about like a map or a navigation system, how if you want to find your direct route, you can do that, but like you can also just kind of zoom in and zoom out to see general areas. So he kind of describes it that way, but just with interviews.
It's great. It is amazing what is possible. It is just amazing what's possible. I mean, with the podcast platform that we use, I just still think it's magic. Dimitri's using it way too much to think of it as magic. To him, it's still work, but it automatically generates, at the same time as it generates the recording, it generates a transcript. And to edit the recording, you can just edit the transcript. So you pull, here's a whole section that maybe somebody's phone rang and they had to take a phone call. And that would obviously be in the recording. You just pull that out of the transcript and it pulls it out of the recording, which I think is just magic. I just think that's just absolutely insane. You pull it out of because it's so much easier to find something in text. You do a search for a word, and it finds it, it pulls it out, and it magically, in my mind, it pulls it out of the recording as well. So yeah, there's all kinds of opportunities, and I love what you're talking about in terms of the indexing, Jess. That's really, it's exciting. I mean, it's very exciting what's possible. Anybody else? Any thoughts about just the project of what's next in general?
Yeah, I can just, I want to say I think that's a brilliant idea of it seems like similar to using a kind of the citizen science model, right? Of having like the framework, and then people can do the data collection, and setting up that framework is a great idea. Yeah, I don't know why we didn't think of it before. And then, and that segues though to it is amazing, like the technology and the tools we have, but a lot of those tools also, and I haven't thought through this fully, I mean, are using AI. I mean, they're using the various things that we just were talking about earlier are problematic too. So I guess part of the thinking, or our thinking going forward, is how to use those tools in a way that's aligning with the values and so on that we want to accomplish will be an important part of the discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it was so funny to answer you in the smack in the head of why didn't we think of this? I was initially thinking, well, we'll pull together a team, and that team will talk about what are the questions that we want to have. And it's like, no, the community's got to determine what the questions are. I mean, we just keep coming back to it. If we apply catalytic thinking to absolutely everything, it will keep bringing us back to, no, it's not about us, it's about the community. Who needs to be involved? Oh, everybody needs to be involved. So, yeah. Well, let's dive in and talk about the AI part of it. And Dimitri, how are we doing on YouTube?
I've been checking.
Okay.
I don't see it.
Okay. I've sent out the questions ahead of time. If you didn't get them, that's okay. We'll be going over them. For all of the people that are going to be affected by our case studies, and we've talked about this so much. We talked about who will be affected. We talked about so much when we were even just doing the whole what's next, making sure that we have a library of resources, making sure that we're documenting. We've talked about that a lot, and I think I shared with you all a link to questions about who will be affected. For all of the people who are going to come to want to see those case studies, read them, whether that is in a class at a university, or they're doing something with their board and they just want to see what we did with our board about something. What could our sharing what we've learned make possible for all those people? Yeah, John, go ahead.
One of the things I often say is you don't know what you don't know. And I think a lot of times the systems that we've been involved in, oppressed by, whatever word you like to use, and a lot of the resources that we've been denied have limited the scope that we look at things. We don't really have a sense of the scope. So I think to some degree, opening up these doors and kind of letting people look. I think I shared this story before. As a kid, I grew up in kind of challenging circumstances. And I remember saying, God, this is really my thing. If you would let me just look inside Disneyland before I die, I will know that I have had a great life. And some of you might laugh at that, but the good news is I moved to Anaheim when I first got here and could see the Matterhorn out of my office window. So I lived in Disneyland for 6 months. My kids hated Disneyland because I was there so much. But the idea was you don't get it all at once. You have to go in, you have to explore. And I think a lot of times we have been discouraged from being open to what we don't know. We don't have that, I call it frontier mentality, that, when people came, they wanted to see what's out there. I think we want to use our work and then encourage people to come and see what's out there. And I expect they will actually bring stuff with them that will actually add to our work, because there are things that we didn't know. So I just think it's a growth opportunity for us and for them when we open those doors to the more we make this work available to people. I talk about it all the time with people. It's like, stop trying to fix things and try to create the future you're really looking for. And the more I kind of preach that to people, the more you can see their eyes open a little. So that was my thought.
Oh, yeah, yeah, huge, huge. One of the conversations I had, I want to make sure I've got my notes right, because one of the conversations I had with a funder, they were talking about the fact that the interviewers, and so, we're talking about what the case studies will make possible when it's done, but they were talking about what the act of interviewing will make possible for the interviewers. And that had not occurred to me. So it's all part of what you're talking about, John. Yeah. What else do you all think are sharing what we've learned in these documenting case studies of our learnings around these demonstration projects? What will that make possible for the people who read them, come across them, use them?
Well, I go back to Jessica, what you shared at the top of the call, that I think we get, and this speaks to John, what you were saying also, people have a sense of agency by how they can actually impact whatever they're engaging with. And I think, that agency comes not only from the competence, which is like, what are the types of questions, like that's the tool, but also just the confidence that and comfort people would have in being able to see that this is not hard. It's a tool, but it's not a hard tool to use. And in fact, it can be a subtle tool, or it can also be like, if there was good bludgeoning, that those questions can either ease into things, but the exact same question can also just pulverize an assumption that's being held, because it kind of just goes either right around it or right through it. Those questions don't care about assumptions in the same way that our our other ones do. And so I think just, as an outcome of it, that people are able to exercise a stronger sense of agency and actually have, and I'm steering really away from the word empowerment, because that's about power and power relationships, whereas agency is about what people can actually do themselves, irrespective of what the power system is allowing them to. So Jessica, thanks for sort of sharing your story, because it sparked that.
Yeah, I actually, your comment about empowerment and agency made me chuckle, because I just started teaching Social Work 101, and literally just had a conversation about what empowerment versus agency. But yeah, and also because I'm teaching that class and looking more at the history of social work, been looking at how it was even developed as a profession, and a lot of that came from like practice turned into professionalization, and it was taking what people learned, in different doing different types of social welfare at the time, right? It wasn't called social work yet, and systematizing it, or creating like training programs, and then putting, that kind of thing. And I always look at this as like a framework of doing, like I've said this before, right? Community organizing work does a lot of this, but there's a lot of different things that people learn, whether it's a training program, a certificate program, that's like really helpful for just learning tools that you can use. It's a tool, like tools in toolbox kind of thing, especially in these moments, I think it's great to have an option to have some, it's like best practice versus evidence-based practice. Like this is best practice, and like that shows a best practice of like, these are the outcomes that can happen. These are the different ways that we've used this. These are the different, in different settings or environments, and different outcomes or what has come out of it. And it's by showing the practice of it or the use of it that's like demonstrates its utility, and how it can be adapted to different spaces.
That adapting part is huge. Yeah. 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 I mean, you're making me think about, it's one thing to read, here's what the questions are. Here's some thoughts about them, which is the book I'm writing. And it's a whole nother thing here's how a food bank used it to do X. Here's how that whole, how do you adapt it? How do you, I like that word, adapting it. Yeah. What else? What will these case studies make possible for the folks who are reading them? And I'm sort of getting from what you're talking about, Jessica, I'm getting a sense of, and Justin, the whole agency piece of, yeah, I could do this. I could try this. This isn't intimidating.
Yeah, I think it pulls in without having to without having to go through like all this, like a whole curriculum or a whole degree program, credentialed program. It allows people to do a lot, like bring in a lot of the different ideas around strength-based work, or how equity, like how do you build in equity into conversations or decision making. It does a lot of that without having to go through like a whole background in it. So it can be like learned and practiced in a way, like without having to do all that all that time. And
I love that. How do you build equity into decision making? As I'm writing the book, so much framing is coming into it forces me to clarify my thinking into words. And a thought, and Justin, you've talked about this so often about busting assumptions without having to attack the assumptions. That the questions, I talk about it a lot now, about the questions do the heavy lifting. And the thought that has occurred to me as I've been writing is that the questions are sort of a Trojan horse. The point that you're making, Jess, in terms of building equity into decision making, by asking who's going to be affected and what would it take for them to lead this decision, you don't have to say the words inclusion. You don't have to say the words equity. By just asking a question of, well, it's logical to talk to the people who are going to be affected. I mean, duh. There's sort of this Trojan horse thing about it, where as you mentioned, Justin, they can seem very innocuous, these questions, or they can just smack you over the head. But yeah, that phrasing, how to build equity into decision making. What else? To me, there's a big piece in sort of seeing yourself in a story that you don't necessarily see yourself in theory. So you could hear it, you know, we've talked about what will be in the library is the theory, what is catalytic thinking, the case studies, what does it look like in practice, and then a little bit of pedagogy in terms of how we've taught it, not this is the way, but how we've taught it. And every time I repeat those three things, I wind up saying, because people need to see themselves. I think there's something really powerful in you know, we relate by story. That's what we're wired for, is we relate by story. So I think that's what case studies are. They're stories.
Yeah, in this case, showing what's possible, and hopefully a range of possibilities. I guess, like, I'm also thinking about, though, I think Vu brought up, right, the fish, like there's the also the side of it that maybe we don't want to have limit people's imaginations either. So how do you create those cases that keeps it open to, like, a lot of different ways of doing things being possible?
Oh yeah. And Vu, I don't know if you're on to be able to share the story of the fish with anybody who's not familiar with it. And if not, I will happily do so.
Hey everyone, it's Vu. Yeah, I've been listening. Yeah, the fish, which I think I might have actually dreamed up because I can't find any evidence of this at all.
I have looked for it so many times, and I have finally learned to say, I don't care if it's true or not.
But basically, there was an experiment that I may have made up that where groups of kids were asked to draw a fish, and one group was shown a drawing of a fish and said, you know, here's an example. Another group was not given the example, and the group that was not given the example of the fish drew just much more creative drawings of fish because they were not anchored by the drawing that they had seen. So that just shows, like, you know, we get so anchored with all these archetypes, what things could be like, what boards, what fundraising should look like, what everything, that it's really hard for us to unconsciously get rid of that sort of influence on how we think about things.
Yeah.
So we got to draw a new fish, and maybe it's not a fish, maybe it's like a type of fungus. I don't know.
A fungus fish. I like it.
I think it's beginner's mind.
It is beginner's mind. It is, yeah, very much so. Very much so. And the stories can help with that, or as Angie's pointing out, they can also give somebody a picture of a fish. Oh, this is how you have to do it. So there's a piece in there. I want to make sure I jot that down. There's a piece in there in terms of how we tell the story that reminds this is one story. This is not your story. But I think that needs to be there's a condition for success in there in terms of how the story is told, so that it's not dogmatic.
I also think, you know, and I don't know to what degree our examples illustrate this, although I think they do pop up. I always, I'll front load it with saying, you know, I'm going to get to where Carl always used to say, I don't know where this is going, but I really enjoyed it, to paraphrase. But I think that there needs to be an acknowledgement and a humility around the pain and challenge that this line of questioning actually introduced. Like it's not always, easy and nice and like, oh, it's utopian. It isn't. And I think it is because when the drawing turns out not to look like a fish, well, for all the fish lovers, that's really hard. And even as a practitioner of it, and I've now had this, so many times, I know it's just part of the pattern. You get a moment of resistance.
Mhm.
I mean, when that assumption, starts to shift, when people start to interrogate, particularly if it's a change element. I mean, it's one thing if you're just kind of using it as a planning tool, which is perfectly good at, like the logistics of planning. What does it take to do it? I think when that's being used to actually envision a different reality or to Trojan horse your way into like, no, we're actually wrong. Like our assumption is wrong. We need to change that. That's a friction point that is very real. And if you engage in this really, genuinely, you are likely to hit that. You are likely to experience that. So again, I'm thinking about that comfort and confidence side of this, of preparing people for it may feel unresolved. Now, that was where I was coming around to Carl. It's like sometimes it feels like, okay, well, I understand, and the decision is X. Yes, the decision was self-evident, but the implementation feels impossible, or I'm scared, or you got to be crazy. Like, yeah, I know it's the right thing to do, but and those buts always introduce themselves at some point in the process. So I think the degree to which the case studies can honestly illustrate that component of it and potentially show where the humility is required. And I think also, I do a lot of work in values, and I tell people, I'm like, we need to accept that we are hypocrisy machines. Like the human brain is just, it's like we will do things that go against what we think we believe. And two things that we believe are going to be in conflict with each other. And so rather than thinking about like it's bad, like we have to avoid hypocrisy, it's really, how do we shed light on it? How do we come at it, objectify the hypocrisy and force ourselves to deliberate around it? We might still go ahead and, shop from the store that we said we would never shop from, or like, but I think there is a space where we're holding that discomfort and making sure like, no, you don't actually get to absolve yourself from the hypocrisy. You have to live with it. You have to navigate through it. You have to negotiate. You have to have intentionality around it, with the hopes that limits it into the future. But I think that again, it's going on in the background of these conversations. And I think the degree to which we can bring it more clearly and the case studies can more clearly illustrate that, people can understand, they're going to feel that, they're going to experience that, they're going to need some resolve in that.
Yeah, I think many of these are points that when we get to the questions that we're going to be asking people are going to need to be in those conversations. Let's turn at this point to the possibility of artificial intelligence. In order to determine what we've learned so that people are actually knowing what they don't know, having that sense of agency, adapting it to different circumstances, relating to it in different ways as stories. What can AI make possible for determining what we've learned?
So I'll try and start the conversation. I think the best description of generative AI that I have heard so far is that it's like having infinite interns. So if you think about what infinite interns would be good for us for in terms of like if you said to them, go and look at all the data that we've collected and all the interviews that we've done, and they could do all that transcribing for us, and so on. But would you trust them to have our tacit knowledge, our understanding of context, our possibly ability to join the dots, though they're very good at sort of doing like that? No, you wouldn't. You would sort of still want that sort of oversight, and you just know that there would be in there mistakes and so on. So it makes possible, it seems to me, an ability to synthesize vast oceans of sort of knowledge and sort of bring it together. But it also makes possible for it makes possible for people to synthesize sort of things in sort of very quick ways, and possibly, I'm looking at Angie here, but my other colleagues, if I said to you, it knows how to, it can do thematic analysis for you. Yeah, it can sort of code your text, and it can come up with themes and so on. So it can do all those things that a research assistant would do. But the problem is that you don't know. If I said to you 1% of it is completely wrong, you don't know which is the 1%. So there is what it can also do for us is mislead us.
I love the infinite interns.
And just to jump on that, it won't tell you it's misleading you too, right? Because AI, it doesn't want to admit that it doesn't know something, so it sort of creates this like round and round like justification that it's sometimes hard to figure out exactly what's going on. So it's at least with the interns, like they are, well, sometimes I think often they will admit when they don't know something.
What
I
else?
had
Yeah.
my nephew works in technology. He said, anything AI produces is a hallucination. Like they talk about the hallucinations as being the bad stuff, but he said everything that's produced that is a conclusion of any sort is a hallucination.
Wow.
I think, but I think actually, and I know, like, not to go into the sort of esoteric debate, but the idea of both artificial and intelligence as terminology that we're even using, I mean, this is accelerated analytics is really what it is. Like that's the benefit, is that it can, just as Carl was saying, it's a pattern recognition system. That's all it really is. And it's got rules for, like identifying those patterns, but it identifies patterns. So the benefit it has is that it can see patterns. Wow. And I think if it's analyzing, our transcripts, it is going to see what is the pattern of behavior and be able to bring that out. I think it can't make any conclusions about whether that's a good pattern, a bad pattern, or the right or the wrong. But I think that's the power, that it augments our ability to see patterns that our own brain is going to miss. Like, this is why I think it's so incredible in the medical field. Like, it can, say, hey, all these scans show that this common thing happens. Like, look for that. I see that. You missed that. That's there. So I think, if we keep it in that space, the pattern recognition is probably the piece that's so powerful, because it will see what the pattern of the questions, the pattern of the answers, the pattern, even again, sort of the cycle, it should be able to help identify in a way we might not see.
You just blew my brain open. So we were in, God, I'm feeling exactly like I felt when we were in California, Dimitri. We met with, we spent a bunch of time with Beth Cantor. And Beth, for those of you who don't know, is very into tech for nonprofits. And so she has been diving into AI like crazy. And using it very, very specifically for evaluation, which I found very interesting. And also spent time with Gail Roberts, who is spending a lot of time looking at applying AI for nonprofits. And it was after those two back-to-back conversations that I went, okay, my resistance to artificial intelligence went down considerably once I heard how they were using it. And that's how I'm feeling as you're talking about it, Justin. One of the things that Gail brought up, and I don't know how it applies here, but I think it might, is she said that she did an experiment where she wrote her life story through the lens of all the crap that she had gone through in her life. Gail is a trans woman who is my age. So she didn't come out like right now or in her, she wasn't in her 20s now. She was in her 20s 40 years ago. And so just dealing with all of the different things that she's dealt with, she scribbled down her story. And then she asked AI to reframe it through the lens of what she had learned. And she said that it completely changed how she saw her life. And there's that reframing piece that I also think that AI is powerful. And the more I've been talking to people, they say, yeah, AI is really good at reframing. I'm not sure what that has to do with us, but I think there's something there. And it probably has to do with what you were talking about, Justin. As you were talking, the thought that occurred to me is not just the pattern recognition inside an individual case study, but looking at all of them, which had never occurred to me. And what are we learning in aggregate? That's huge. What else do you all think AI could make possible for determining what we've learned and documenting those learnings?
One of the things, Hilda, that I often ask when I use it is there anything that you think I missed? And a lot of times it'll come back and say, well, now that you bring that up, here's such and such. And then after that, it'll say, okay, yeah, how do you feel? And I say, is there anything else that you think I missed? And I just think, again, it gives us a chance to maybe become aware of things that we didn't originally see. But as Justin was saying, because I use it that way, Justin, I see it as it's just a tool that allows me to take advantage of a lot of library books. I love libraries, right? So I just think of it like the real speed librarian, right? Because I used to go to the library and say, so Miss Librarian, I need a book on fantasy. And she would take me to the room and say, enjoy yourself. And I would. I feel like that, except it does it really fast, which saves us a lot of time. But because we get the gift of that time, I think it helps us to take time to explore more. I used to say when the internet first came, there are people who go to the internet to find things. And then there are people who go to the internet to find out what's out there. And those are kind of going in two different directions. And I think sometimes we can use this tool the same way.
Yeah, Carl.
I'm going to riff off John a little bit, but in a sorry, John, but in a slightly negative way. And I was going to say is that what it makes possible is that people don't learn properly, is that people are lazy, and that they don't go through the process of reading and learning. And some of the stuff I'm reading about AI is that one of the big dangers is that it makes us all stupid, because rather than sort of like reading something, for example, and then using AI to do what John said of like, I mean, have I missed anything? There is the potential that people just think, I can't be bothered. I'd rather be watching TV or something. And so just give me the answer in with the minimum effort possible. So, you know, I mean, it's like all tools, isn't it? You know, I mean, we can use them well and we can use them badly.
If we are using AI for determining what we've learned and documenting those learnings, what can that make possible in determining what we've learned? So
Can
if
you
we're
repeat
doing
that?
interviews, if we're doing the interviews with humans, not looking at the recordings and stuff, but if we're doing the interviews with humans, what can AI make possible for determining what we've learned out of those interviews? For coming to, I guess, its conclusions, maybe? Documenting learnings? I mean, what's the point? What's the point of documenting what we've learned anyway? We've talked about the point is having outcomes that show the practice, encouraging people that they can try this, showing what's possible. What can AI make possible for determining what we've learned and what we're going to share?
I have a hard time answering this because I don't know if we need AI for that. I think like this is the part where we need use ourselves and our, you know, our human brains for analyzing, for coming up with the themes that, I mean, I guess, but maybe something we could use, as John pointed out, is like, okay, what's missing after you've done that process? Would perhaps be helpful. I mean, I guess in qualitative research, we tend to do that by having other people look at the same thing and, you know, intercoder reliability. So maybe the AI becomes one of those people.
Yeah, yeah. John, did you have something? No?
No, well, go ahead, Carl.
I was just going to say, I almost feel like we're tiptoeing around the question of can we give ourselves permission to do something that part of us knows might be bad. So, you know, I mean, there is a very direct answer to your question, it seems to me, which is what can it enable? Well, it can enable us to do a vast amount of work for virtually no money at all. And you know, I mean, if you look at some of the people, I mean, that I see blogging about how they're using AI, and in particular, there's a guy called Simon Willison who's a data journalist who talks about how he's using AI for his work. We can make it possible to sort of synthesize vast amounts of work, to tailor responses to people's individual circumstances and questions in a way that wouldn't be humanly possible for us with all the resources that we've got now. But in doing so, we are giving all of our data to whichever sort of model that we're feeding it into. We are going to have to face up to sort of ethical, environmental, and various sort of social problems in terms of sort of like what we are doing by supporting the companies behind those models. So there's a bit of a trade-off, I think, essentially, is what I feel like the question's getting at.
Good. Yeah, Dimitri, let me.
Carl, I think that's a really good point. one of the things that I've been looking at is the fact that you can get a large language model, which is an AI engine, locally. I mean, you can, OpenAI is, you can download it and you can put it on your machine and you can have it, in a local environment. Now, obviously, its capabilities aren't going to be the same as one that's connected to the web overall. But if what its purpose is to extract dialogue, compare ideas and do that. I don't know enough for sure. And I've been talking with my eldest who has installed one on his own machine. He does tech work. As to something like that might be possible to insulate us a little bit from the concerns you've raised, which are valid. And I support them and I agree with them that it's something that we really need to be thinking about. Add to that, is it possible to do this without tying directly into, the global cloud, so to speak, and all the people who are behind it?
Well, you all are bringing me to the question that I was hoping we would get to. So I'm really glad. I think that the most and I've been sharing this a lot with people recently, in terms of decision making in general. I think we're at the point of asking, because we've talked about what AI could make possible. I think we're at the point of asking, what's the worst that could happen? What's the worst that could happen if we use AI for everything that y'all are talking about? And what's the worst that could happen if we don't use AI for that? And because you're already starting to go into the what is the worst that could happen? What is the worst that could happen if we decide to use AI to accomplish what you all have been talking about? Looking at identifying patterns, learning in the aggregate, reframing things, asking about what we've missed, and etc. What is the worst that could happen if we decide to use AI for all of those things that we think that AI could make possible? We've already talked about the big picture context of our planet in terms of use of energy. Dimitri talked about that first thing when we were talking about our awesomes. Does that go against our values? Carl bringing up the huge point of, are we feeding our information into an engine that could use it for good or use it for evil? What else? What is the worst that could happen if we use AI for all the things that y'all just listed?
Well, we talked about the environmental impact of AI or potential environmental impact, and we would just be adding to that.
Mm-hmm.
I think because we don't always know what that 1% of hallucinations is, it always casts more doubt on the work you've done.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to kind of figure out how you're going to make sure that that doesn't diminish the work you're trying to do.
Yep. Yeah, Carl, go ahead.
I think the worst that can happen is that we, if I can say this word, I can never say it properly, anthropomorphize these things. So we start to just become so accustomed to them that we just think that they're humans, and that they then end up replacing the human relationships that this organization is founded on trying to support and strengthen and so on.
So the space of unbiased analysis at its extreme could show that we are wrong. it could show that there isn't a distinct, that the margin of error or the standard deviation for what everything that we do versus what happens in other instances isn't significant. I mean, that's sort of the worst case, is that we
Well,
have
yeah,
all these
yeah.
we have all these assumptions that this is a better system, but in the grander scheme of things, when it's analyzed, we might realize the pattern is not the question. The pattern is something about relationships that people are uniquely able to build. So I think there is always the risk that deep analysis can reveal false assumptions or, correlation where there is no causation.
I think
So
any evaluation could do that, though. I think that's the point of doing it in part.
Well, except I think AI has the potential to be unbiased. All other evaluation systems, when we design them, have, even at the best, laid intent, there's always some bias built into the way that we are doing that analysis. And there is an AI too. I mean, I don't want to say that it's totally unbiased, but I just think that is a risk, that if we put it into the system, it may spit out something that fundamentally challenges the belief upon which we've built all of this. It's just a possibility.
Well, and there's something in that. I know this is going to sound bizarre. This is going to sound so bizarre. You guys are going to have me committed. I get really excited by what you just said. I get really excited. We said we were a 10-year experiment. We said very specifically that we want to see what happens. And if the answer is we spent a whole lot of time, did a whole lot of things to learn that it's not what we thought, it's something else. There's something in that that's really exciting to me. And, that's my own issues. But there's something in that that's why you experiment. But I think, yeah, I'm really glad you raised it, because now you got my brain going, ooh. What else? What's the worst that could happen if we use AI?
I guess I would go, it's getting, again, a little techie and wonky, but we don't necessarily know the assumptions that the AI is built on. I mean, that's part of the issue, and that's part of the hallucinations. It's part of yes, it's a incredible pattern and recognition and analysis system, but that is also still coded by somebody.
Yep.
And so we are at risk of being at the mercy of a set of assumptions that are totally obfuscated from us in terms of what that analysis is.
Yeah. And the questions that I would have before we go into what is the worst that can happen if we don't use AI, is that what conditions need to be in place to make sure that these worst, in many cases, okay, the environmental concerns, what are there things that we can do that sort of assuage that? The need for double checking and triple checking on what 1% is the hallucination. The fact that it will feed our information into sort of a big data thing. My guess is there are things that we can do along the way to minimize those. The same thing I'll ask in terms of, okay, what is the worst that could happen if we don't use it? For all the things that y'all said that it can do in terms of the pattern recognition, the accelerated analysis, the finding things that we may have missed, questions that we should have asked, the ability to reframe. What is the worst that could happen if we don't use AI for that?
The project doesn't get done.
What else? It's a good one. And it doesn't get done for several reasons. One, it is people hours, time, which is budget. So the budget would increase dramatically. And in part, I want to share that it depends on how we define using AI. And here's what I mean by that. I needed to, Dimitri recorded when I was keynoting in Alaska. And we wanted to take a portion of that talk and turn it into just a short video. Dimitri uploaded that into the podcasting platform that we use, and it immediately created, its AI created a transcript for us. Now, we might have AI do that. We may have a different AI system create transcripts of our recordings, but there's so many different layers of what we're really talking about AI doing at this point. And there's so many things that have already become normal in you know, if I ask Google a question, the first thing that's popping up is their AI. And so I'm really just thinking about, as we're talking about, quote, using AI, at what point are we actually talking about using it? But what's the worst that could happen if we don't use it? If we decide we're going to have humans do all of that legwork? And I guess the question is, what are we really talking about using it for?
You know, developing skills to use tools is important. I think staying totally away from it. When I first went to school a couple years ago, there was like this, we will absolutely not use these tools. This year, it was a completely 180-degree turn. It was like, we'll embrace these tools. And my question was, but who's going to teach us how to use these tools? And how can we make sure we use them the right way for the right things? And I think that is a domain of learning that will be important. So I don't want to sidestep that and miss that opportunity. That's, you know, I do agree it's not all clear, but I also think it's a bit like sailing. You know, when people first started sailing, they didn't really know how to navigate, but they got better. And I think sometimes being a part of that development, that journey is, you know, I'm not, you know, I'm not, you know, but I think it also will test our ability to know when to use it and for what, and when not to use it and why. And I think those are important capabilities. I think we have to figure out, when do we, you know, like, is it good for the transcripts? Maybe. Is it good for producing some kind of conclusion? Maybe not so much. And I don't think we know the answers, but I think if you don't engage, you know, when they first said, oh, we're not going to touch it, I was like, these folks are going to graduate from school. You're going to say, oh yeah, but we never touched AI. But now I'm going into a workplace that is assuming certain things. So just how do we kind of co-establish that learning as part of our product? It really is, here's some things we did, and here's some pluses and some minuses that go with that. I think that's kind of going to be important in the next iteration of who uses the work, because it can give them some guidance as to asking some of those questions. So we get to maybe in some ways become exemplary.
And it's another demonstration project.
Yes, exactly.
It's really another demonstration. You know, one of the funders that I was speaking to is a real evaluation geek, brilliant evaluation geek. And she said, but this is another demonstration project. And very specifically focusing on what questions are we, I think what you're bringing up and what all of you are bringing up in different ways is, and it really is occurring to me that it's not about quote using AI. It's about all of the different steps in the project. Are we using AI for developing transcripts? Are we using AI for determining analytics? Are we using AI to answer questions? There's a whole bunch of different quote ways to use this tool. And I think it's asking the questions at each stage. But you're right, John, this is about what we're learning in the process of using artificial intelligence in its various capacities
In a nascent stage.
in a very nascent stage. You know, I'm thinking back to the days where in a math class, they said, do not bring a calculator. That's cheating. You remember that? Remember? All of us, raise your hand. You know, that's cheating.
Ask how many brought slide rules.
Oh, it's just slide rules.
Slide rule.
Uh-huh, there you go. Yeah, yeah. And you're right, Dimitri, it is nascent.
It's changing every.
It is changing every day. One of the things that was brought up, because we were at all of the protest meetings about the data centers here. And one of the things that was fascinating was one of the speakers, and he's been very, very active in this movement, is he works in AI. That is his job. He is an artificial intelligence consultant. He works in AI, and he said, this is the absolute stupidest place you could put a data center. So he believes we need this thing. But he's was very specific, as were many other of the speakers, saying how many technologies were invested in 10 years ago that don't exist anymore or aren't necessary and so as it's evolving, I think what we're learning now, I love that word nascent, Dimitri, is as it's evolving, I think we are at 2 years from now, we're going to look back and go, oh, weren't we cute? Yeah, Dimitri, for me.
I think one of the things in the worst department is missing some of the things we talked about in terms of what are we missing? What are the patterns that we don't see? And I'm thinking about how they are using this pattern recognition power in medicine to analyze X-rays and to be able to, in a fairly short period of time, be able to see things that a radiologist who's been doing this for 50 years misses because it's super subtle. And so one of the things that we would miss is that opportunity or that lens that could be focused on all of this data to be able to see not only the patterns, but maybe, you know, in terms of what Justin was talking about, maybe that there is no pattern, you know, that there is nothing here, and that we continue to move forward, spinning our wheels, so to speak, to. Again, that becomes our demonstration project. Look what we learned. We learned nothing. So, you know, in terms of going through, but nevertheless, I think that's one of the other things that would be lost.
There's another piece in here. I just messing with my speaker. Okay. There's another piece in here, and I don't remember who was talking about it. Maybe it was Justin. I don't remember who was talking about the assumptions on which the AI is built. I don't think it was you, Justin. We know that most of the AI as it is currently being built is being built by white men. And that there are sexist assumptions, there are racist assumptions, there are colonialist assumptions. To me, it raises the question, if we don't use AI, if we do use AI, what do we use it for? Getting back to do we use it for transcripts or do we use it for analytics? But I think that if we don't use AI, we don't get to have these conversations. It is such a critical part of life right now and part of decision making across so many organizations, for-profit, nonprofit, government, is the extent to which we use it. I think that we have an opportunity to ask the question at every point, what makes sense to use AI for, and what do we absolutely need humans for? To me, there's something in there that's talking about re-emphasizing, no, we really need humans for this. And I think that we keep asking about, can't AI do that? Can't AI do that? And I think that there's a part in here of defining, what do we absolutely need humans for? And to me, if we don't use AI, we don't get to have that conversation. And I think that's part of a bigger learning. Yeah, John.
I was thinking about the internet when it first came. It was kind of the same impact. It's like, what do we really need this internet thing for? And I think to some degree, there are a lot of people who felt it was going to, Big Brother would be everywhere. Da, da, da. I mean, and to some extent, some of those fears were grounded and justified. And in other ways, can you imagine what this would be like if we didn't have it now? So there's a place. It's going to take a moment to find that place. And having lived through that, there's guardrails that we may have an opportunity to be a part of. When I look at kids and social media and some of the things that we're saying, some of that, and Carl, I appreciate that. Don't think I'm in opposition to anything you said. I agree 100% with everything you said. But at the same time, I'm kind of like, it's like, well, if we don't try, we'll never know where things need to be really examined. And I hate to say this, but I'd rather trust us to do some of that than some other people to do some of that. I'd rather have people like us asking the catalytic thinking questions. Who is that going to affect? Who is that going to impact? Than to have people who are making money off of this not care or think about any of those things. So I think that's a part of it too, is bringing our lens to, all of the bias that's in there. 100% I agree. I've done a lot of work recently trying to read Afrofuturist stuff and then African history by Africans and not by non-Africans. And part of what I recognize is there's such a deep hole there but if we don't start to deal with that, then that predominant narrative drives what happens. And I think some ways, even if our work itself isn't all we think it is. I think we make a contribution by being a part of that march. And I think that's what attracts me to the work. It's not that I think we have an answer. It's that I think we're giving it a different flavor.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think, John, you really hit on some stuff that was going on for me around what does it look like when we include this in the demonstration experiment? When we say, you know, hey, if you're out there doing catalytic thinking, chances are you might have a shitload of flip charts or interview transcripts or stuff. Like, we're looking at a way that actually helps amplify what you can do with that. Like, so we're modeling, like, if you gather information, which catalytic thinking and decision making will do by default. Gosh, what happens when you talk to all the people affected and you get all this narrative? Like, what do you do with it? So I think, to, you know, John, what you were saying, I think, you know, this whole idea of like, we got to know what the tool is and how it's usable. And if we don't use it, we won't understand if it plays a role actually in what we are doing and can make this even easier or more effective for folks. So I think that there's, you know, again, sort of, if we are transparent and model how we are using it to amplify our own catalytic thinking and decision-making process, it then just becomes another of the tools, just like the questions are. It's just another piece that we are vetting and engaging with and trying to figure out. Because I think about it, you know, in terms of, I think the other thing is if we don't figure out what it's doing, we may not know how it plays a role. So for example, now, I mean, if we ever needed something to kill strategic plans, just ask a client, tell AI to read your website and answer these 4 questions, and you're going to get your strategic plan. And guess what? It has a 99.9% chance to look exactly like what $25,000 is going to get you with a consultant. I mean, it is like, it's insane. I've actually done this with someone I was working with, where we were doing strategy work, and they said, oh, well, we just did this to see our strategic plan. And I was like, yeah, it looks exactly like a strategic plan. And they were like, well, that's not very helpful to us. And I'm like, yeah, because if AI can generate it now, and it's supposed to be a human thing, chances are we didn't need to do it to begin with. You know, that's what I think about, is like all this, the fact that AI is sending me an email. I'm like, well, why is the email? Why do we need the email then? If a computer generates it and a computer reads it, what purpose does it actually serve other than just busy? Like, it just demonstrates how much busy shit we have created that actually had, like, if AI can do it. Now that's not the analytics. This is more of the like business process stuff. It's like, it probably means the business process wasn't necessary. If discernment was taken out, we didn't need to do it. We didn't need to send those marketing emails, because guess what? If a computer can do it.
Yeah.
Probably was unnecessary.
Dimitri just muttered under his breath, bullshit jobs. David Graeber's book, Bullshit Jobs. Because we cannot have a session that we don't mention David Graeber.
We've had a couple of comments.
Yeah, Dimitri, I'm going to give you.
Okay, this is coming from the comment stream on YouTube, which is where we were asking people to comment now. There's a person named Chris, and they had 3 comments on the AI discussion that's going on right now. The first is the need to look at case studies and determine whether to weight certain ones over others, representation, robustness, etc. And yes, AI will add information base on the pattern it sees, not necessarily sum up what it actually is. So that's another point. And then the last comment that he made is, one of the challenges I've had with using AI to synthesize interviews is how to leave the interviewer voice out of the synthesis, if that's desired. Thank you, Chris.
I would want to know more about leaving the interviewer voice out. I would want to, that,
Well, I will comment to ask him to tell us.
yes. Tell us more. Tell us more. Absolutely. Couple of observations as we're closing out, and let's do some reflections. And I think right now reflections are going to be really important in terms of yeah, the conversation we've had. What I'm sensing as a conclusion is at each point that we are thinking about, it's really about breaking down this project into the various phases, the various bits of work that need to be done, and really asking it about each of them. You know, it's as we were talking about, is it, do we want to use it for creating transcripts? Do we want to use it for helping with identify patterns, identify themes? Do we want to use it for, and if we do, under what circumstances and what conditions need to be in place in order to make this the most effective it can be? So and I hate asking these questions about a tool. To me, that is coming with the answer and trying to justify the answer. To me, the question is, what is the most effective way for us to, let's say, analyze what we have seen in, we've gotten a group of community members together and come up with the 7 questions that we want to make sure that every case study answers. What is the most effective way to get that done? What conditions need to be in place for that to be done? At that point, once we have figured out what all those conditions are, it may make sense to then ask, is there a role for AI in this area? Is there a role for AI in this area? Rather than coming with the assumption of, we're going to use AI for evaluation, which is very tool-based and not based in what we want to accomplish, not creating what we want to accomplish. So to me, there's just the need for breaking down the project into all of its pieces parts and asking those questions about what is the most effective way to accomplish each of these pieces, and just being very, very specific in each of those areas, asking these questions at each point. And I will ask all of you to sort of take a deep breath and let's share what is standing out to you, or what conclusions are you coming to, or what's top of mind for you given our conversation today. And I would love for the folks on who are watching on YouTube to also share what is standing out to you in this conversation. What conclusions are you coming to, or what questions are still being raised for you?
I think I'd like to go. 2 things. One, there are no simple questions. It's always, there are layers to it. And even as we talk about AI, one of the things that we also really need to kind of say is that it's not ubiquitous, right? There are different tools that do different things with different impacts. And so I don't think it's just, I think we want to be careful not to get caught in the thing of AI as if it's like when people say, well, Black people, like they're all the same. And then the last part is, the more we can clearly articulate these processes, the more we'll be able to more accurately evaluate these processes.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'll follow that up. It's always a little hard following John, but I think going back to what Carl said about being careful not to anthropomorphize. Anyways, we know what the word is. I think it is really important that actually, and I know I was a little bit flippant with the language earlier, but we really think about where, Angie, you were talking about this too, where the human discretion comes in. So AI is not, and again, this might be semantics. AI is an analysis tool, not an evaluation tool. Evaluation requires judgment. So, and judgment is a human like piece. And same thing, like the idea of calling it artificial intelligence. Well, intelligence is actually that's a biologic, that's a human, that's a neuro thing. And I think it's just as we're going through this, being very, very clear about that distinction, which is what are the elements of this where human discretion is actually the critical ingredient, and recognizing that that discretion can benefit from analysis and can benefit from the accelerated data, presentation and manipulation that artificial AI can do. But to be really clear, it's the same realm that people called this a virtual meeting. I'm like, it's not a virtual meeting. It's a real meeting with, like, virtual is when you like have, you're not actually present. Like there's a representation, and I'm like, this is just online, but it's a real meeting. It's not a virtual meeting. And I think the same thing, like artificial intelligence is like, it's not intelligence. Like, let's not give it that power. It may be generative, but it's so I just think is, for me, that's what's standing out, is that we really pay attention to how we're allowing it to potentially shape the behavioral and the human expectation side of it.
Angie's observation before she left was, I'm still thinking about what we might lose with AI versus what we gain, which I think is huge. It's huge. Yeah, Carl.
I've had a similar conversation in the other organization where I'm on the board about should we use it or not, and I worry sometimes I'm just turning into an old sort of like fossil, and and like I'm sort of like, oh, this is all going to end up terribly, and so on. I feel like saying, who am I to say that we shouldn't use this? Because, the potential sort of immediate benefits are substantial. The amount of things that we could do are amazing. I guess ultimately my deep worries are not so much about the technology, they are about the social implications and I guess the political economy of the technology. Sorry, that sounds a bit too academic. What I'm trying to say is that I'm worried that we're moving to a world where this is just accelerating economic gains to a relatively small number of actors, and that large swathes of our community, musicians who I love, that their world is sort of being eaten up sort of by this stuff, and I feel I have no idea what we do about that, and I guess I'm just trying to think. I guess I'm just trying to think, like, do we have almost a sort of a role in sort of saying, no, actually, even though this would benefit us massively, we're not going to use this yet because of the social relations around the technology. But again, that's very easy for me to say here, and it's
Yeah.
So I'm probably not helping here, am I?
Oh, no, you are. You absolutely are.
Hey everyone, it's Vu. I've been listening to this whole thing, and I don't know, I always caution us to not overthink things a bit. I do lean towards Carl's view. I think AI is awful, and I think it's gonna lead to a horrific AI apocalypse. And I've seen a lot of sci-fi movies, so I know what I'm talking about. I think what we need to kind of reframe our thinking around is basically like, what is like opposition research? Basically, fascists have been using AI. They will continue to use AI to create a totalitarian, not just the US, but like the entire world. Like, this is what they're doing. And I think that for us, it may just be necessary for us to know how to use this so that we understand what we're fighting against. Otherwise, we won't. We just don't understand what we're up against. We don't know what is being done because we just have no clue. And it is kind of terrifying. I feel for the musicians and the artists, like what AI could be using as like the infinite interns that Carl was talking about is instead not being used as infinite interns. They're being used as like infinite crappy artists and musicians and poets and whatever. But that's awful. But what's really like evil is like how it's been using, to like target people in Palestine, to bomb people, to target protesters. Like it's going to be used, it's going to be weaponized against us by the fascist state. And so we have to kind of balance, how do we use it in a way that does not give this more information, more, kind of like the DNA testing. Like none of us should be giving our DNA to 23andMe or whatever, because it's creepy as hell, right? Giving that information to people. So I think we have to kind of understand that. And at the same time, we do need to understand how it's used by whom, and to the point where we can actually oppose it when it's needed.
Yeah. Very true. Jess.
Yeah, I mean, I am generally like I find it very AI to be gross in a lot of ways, like the robotic stuff. I was actually just at an exhibit recently, and they called it cyborgification of stuff, which I thought was interesting. But at the same time, like tools are tools, and it always matters on who's using the tool and how you're using it. Like what I'm talking out of my, I don't know this, I'm not a scientist or a doctor, but like radiation, right? Like it can be extremely harmful, but it's used in different ways to help people with like for cancer and stuff. So like I just think about like it does matter who's using it, how we use it. I think when y'all were talking about the creativity part of it, like the artists, right? Like that's because we're using AI or these systems to create things that have no like soul to it. And it's just creating it's content creation. It's not like art. But I've seen artists use like AI to create things that are really incredible too. So, but a lot of times you can tell when it's like just the system did it versus like a human being did something with it, and it's also the explicit nature of like explaining why we used this tool to do this thing matters as well. So I also, and the acceleration of it, it's like, it's accelerating no matter what. So how do we accelerate our work as well? Because the bad shit is happening. So how do we use that acceleration tool to hopefully to balance that out or to like do something that's like does some good. So that's where I'm at. I don't know.
Yeah, I think we're all sort of dancing around what Angie said. I'm still thinking about what we might lose versus what we might gain. Yeah, yeah. Dimitri.
Two things. One, the individual responded on the
Oh, good.
yes, and the person said, or Chris said, I mean that the question itself becomes part of the summary, or if the interviewer makes a comment / clarification that counts as data, just like the response does. So
Sure.
that's what he meant.
Sure.
The other thing I'm thinking about in terms of all of the being replaced by AI, using that as a placeholder. I was at a play that my son was in a couple months ago. And I actually sat in the audience and I watched the play. And afterwards, I went up and I talked to a couple of the actors. And and this was A Streetcar Named Desire. So it's a very well-known play. That there is something about the human experience, being there, being in front of people. And the conversation was, whatever AI does to make movies and to do things in the future, this is not going to be replaceable. Being in a live audience, being around human beings, having a human conversation with real people is not something that is easily duplicated. Maybe robots down the line, who knows? So it just makes me think that there is time for us and an emphasis for us to look at that component of the work that we're doing, which is the real interaction between people. I'm assuming all of you on this screen are real and that I'm not talking to an AI avatar, but I just found that really powerful as we continue this conversation, to just continue to think about how that impacts everything we do and to keep that in mind.
Yeah, and Chris on YouTube, thank you for clarifying that. I've really appreciated your comments. The thing that really is striking me, is the thought that this really is another demonstration project. We're putting our toe in. That we've been an experiment all along, and that we're going to experiment with this, and that at every point we will stop and ask these questions. Because if it's possible to agree with everything that's been said, everything that's been said has been both pro and con. And our answer is yes, we agree with all of the pros and all of the cons. This is new, and it can be scary. And I agree with Vu that it's something that we need to know different ways of using. And when I say we, I mean as the nonprofit world in general, as the social change ecosystem, as movement builders, as movement participants. We need to understand it and have ways of using it that makes sense to us, because like the calculator, I don't think it's going away. And it's a lot scarier than a calculator. Potentially. Any other thoughts before we leave? I know we're running over, but if anybody's got any final words before we leave, and for those who may not have heard when Vu first came on, Vu's book will be released in the middle of October. So go now and pre-order. So that's the important thing, number one. But number two, that there is already an AI that is being released 2 weeks before his book that is key learnings from Vu Le's new book. So the fact that it can be stolen, the fact that bots can be creating the shit that we're already creating, it already exists. It's already real, and that's why we all need to go buy Vu's book.
Thank you, Hildy. Please do not buy the AI book. I have nothing to do with the AI book, okay? So,
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding.
Hildy, you just, I mean, I know this probably came up for other people earlier, but you just freaked the hell out of me when I thought about the fact that, like, when AI gets its hands on all those transcripts and suddenly it figures out the questions to ask, and the bots can just go through catalytic thinking and questions, and like what that would look like.
So actually, that's something I was thinking that I forgot to mention. It doesn't do well with context, right? Or something that's not in its context. It has to be fed information to understand the context. So if you put information in there, like if you're putting in like demographic information or like situational, like what you were using this tool, like these questions for, it only knows that. It can't just create, I mean, it might actually lie to us and create something, because I've heard like people say that AI does lie and create false information. But there's that part of it. There's a context that it misses or it doesn't have. So, and that is important for this, especially catalytic thinking, because of how it's a practice of how you use it and where you use it, what questions you're going to ask and when.
Yeah. I don't think this is the last we are going to be having this conversation. So I am grateful to all of you. And we'll see you next time. I'll keep you posted on how we go. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.